Hello, this is Craig Oldham with Madlow, and I'm here with our good friend Tom Cole, President and CEO of RDA. Tom, welcome back.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, we're on a 6-part series that we've determined now. We're on part 4. So in the first couple of series, we talked a lot about the strategy and how you align your measurement to the strategy. How do you pick your KPIs? Second, we talked about technology and implementing the right technology to kind of extract those KPIs and get the measurement out. And in our last conversation, we talked about the culture, creating organizational agility to ensure that everybody kind of understands the measurement and developing insights. So coming out of that, I asked Tom and he agreed to kind of come back and talk a little bit and drill down into exactly how do you pick those KPIs and how does the technology kind of come together and how do all of those things work? So Tom, if you will, I know Tom's got a couple slides to share with us. Talk to us a little bit how you, how do you go about kind of picking the KPIs?
Sure. Yeah, so to help out with today's discussion, I've just put a couple slides together to walk through what a typical company would do. So I picked our friend George Jetson and his boss, Mr. Spacely at Spacely Sprockets. And Mr. Spacely created a new sprocket, and he believes it's going to just drive company growth, and they're going to sell 1 million of them. And quite frankly, this is really what happens in businesses every day. A new capability, an acquisition, a new process, something that at the corporate level says, hey, something's going to change. We want to affect a change for the business. And when that happens, it sets some goals. And so oftentimes those goals get pretty crazy. You might have one that says, we're going to have 95% annual growth this year, or we're going to grow our new customer base by 40% per month. And these are the kinds of goals that get set. And ultimately what happens is those goals then trickle into objectives, strategic objectives for the business. So I always think of it as goals beget objectives and objectives trickle through the organization. And a strategic objective for Spacely Sprockets might be, we're going to increase market share of Spacely Sprockets. That's one of the things that's strategic to them, that's going to help them achieve their goals of 95% growth. Well, when that bubbles down then to marketing might set some objectives around, we've got to have customers repurchasing our products, or we've got to drive more increased sales through our e-commerce platform, or we've got to have some number of new customers. But the marketing team will set some objectives that they believe support that concept of increasing market share at the corporate level. And that's where we start to get that tie. Next, then we come to this concept of, well, if that's my objective, how am I going to know I'm reaching it? And so we set some digital KPIs, some very measurable specific KPIs. So one might be for customer repurchasing. It might be, how do I get subscription signups? I've got to be able to measure the number that I get. For e-commerce sales, it might be strictly sales volume. It might be sales volume of a particular product or some other attribute. For generating new customers, it might be new customer signups, or it might be product sales per new customer. But these would be specific things that we can measure, specific KPIs. And again, you can see how they support the marketing team's objectives and ultimately support the strategic objectives and ultimately the goals of the business.
So I love this, Tom, how it's top down. And oftentimes with our clients, I know we see that oftentimes KPIs are bottoms up and tops down. And so something gets squished in the middle. And so you end up measuring things that really maybe aren't important or just kind of don't matter or are tactically focused. So, okay, all that being said, so can you give us some examples of some KPIs that really matter?
Yeah, sure. And your comment was wonderful, because a lot of times we just measure what we can measure, as opposed to kind of thinking through why we're measuring what we're measuring. An example, when I go through with our clients, how to get your arms around the KPIs that you really want to measure, because you can measure a lot of stuff. First of all, I focus on, let's be customer centric. Let's understand in today's world that customers do what customers want to do. In a digital world, they do their research, they chart their own journey, they do what they want. So let's make sure that we're customer centric and that we're mapping our business and marketing objectives, the KPIs that we're going to measure from those objectives, back to what customers really do. From there, let's ensure that we've got a tangible ROI associated with the success of the business. So if I'm going to measure a KPI, it's got to come back to some ROI. I've got to be able to trickle it back to, I'm making an investment, I'm seeing a result, it matters to the business. Because I think that when we look at those KPIs, that's how we measure effectiveness across the focus areas, the particular personas or the particular demographic attributes, or even in a product world, the specific products. So we've got to get our profiles, our personas and things very tight. And we got to measure to those. And then certainly what's working, what's not working with that measurement, we know what we can change, and we know if we're being successful or not. I'll give you some examples. And I'll use an association as our example. If I'm an association, the things that I care about from a marketing standpoint that drive total membership satisfaction, as an example, might be increasing effectiveness of our events or our programs or our legislative actions. It might be growing or increasing membership in particular segments. And ultimately it might be increasing renewals. So those might be some strategic marketing objectives that, again, support the association's objective. So when I look at the KPIs within those, for improving events, it might be event page views, it might be page or program views, it might be registrations, it might be social shares or email shares. So fundamental things to show engagement and activity around our events. In the membership, it might be logins, it might be bounce rates, it might be registrations, it might be conversations, conversions from anonymous users into being known users. That literally means I've got somebody who didn't really want to know me, wasn't part of me, now is part of my organization, it's part of my team. And then it might be things like the resources that they use. And then for renewals, it might be, and again, this comes down to some core financials. It might be number of returning visitors, it might be durations that are on site, it might be dollars that come from those renewals, it might be logins, how many times they log in. So these would be KPIs that I would measure that trickle back up to my objectives, that trickle back up to my association, obviously wanting to increase membership and be valuable to the members.
Right. That makes sense. I love it because, and obviously there's a lot here, right? So you've got to build out those KPIs to be able to understand what's happening in the business, and then building out the insights. The one thing that is, I always find and always have talked to clients and teams that I've had, is let's get away from trying to find these numbers. Let's get to the point where we're actually analyzing what's happening in the business. And a lot of that has to do with technology. So as you start to put together all of these pieces, how do you begin to put together that technology stack that will enable you to not just go around and gather all this information, but be able to put together the insights and the analysis that actually will help drive the business?
Yeah, that is such a great question. With 7,000 plus marketing tools out there, it's so easy to just get inundated with tools, become a slave to those tools in terms of running them, feeding them, operating them. But I like to think about it, and as we talk to our clients, we come back to this concept of, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. You're not going to make a decision right now, you're not going to implement something right now that's going to change the world. What we want to do is we want to build capabilities that impact the business. We want to learn from those capabilities that impact the business, and then be able to learn some more, grow some more. And so, across the bottom of this slide, we talk about attracting constituents, attracting potential customers. And we talk about converting them into being customers, and then ultimately to become advocates, to become returning customers, to become lifetime customers. And that's for two reasons. One, obviously revenue and growth and repeat business and what have you. But the second is, you really learn from those customers that come back and are part of your community. You learn how they got there, you learn what's important to them, and you can grow from that. And so as we look through these capabilities, and I'm sorry for such a busy slide, but as we look through these capabilities, we start with things like, do you even do testing at all? Did you start out with a website that's one size fits all? Did you start then to offer some different pictures or some different content or some different wording or offers or options? Did you start to measure what those were versus what you did before? Were they just new ideas that you implemented, or did you start to do it as a way of doing some A/B testing? Well, once you just start doing some A/B testing, you start to learn that, well, really there's a lot of variables. And so I need to multivariant test, right? It might be the channel, might be the time of day, might be the persona I use, might be a picture, might be the content. So all kinds of options. So, but you can't just start out and do multivariant testing today. You got to learn, you got to grow. And so really this concept of technology is, don't get hung up in the technology, focus on your capabilities. Focus on the capabilities that you have and focus on the capabilities that you want to have. And I think one of the things that Gartner did 10 years ago from an IT standpoint is they said, we've got to have a way of understanding how to deal with all this technology. And so they built out this thing called a layering model. They call it the PACE layering model, where you start at the bottom with these core systems, your financial systems, your ERP systems, your payment systems, warehouse systems, just fundamental things that you don't change all the time. They're there, they run the business. Then you get to this concept of differentiation. And these are the systems that you implement that make you unique. And again, I'll go back to the capabilities. Not everybody's Amazon or Walmart. Not everybody knows their customer base with such vast amounts of data that they can dynamically change content and make offers and change pricing. So you've got to start with what your capabilities are. So, there might be 25 different systems of differentiation here. You might only use 3 or 4. That's perfectly fine. Use those 3 or 4. Let's now start to talk about what's the next thing you want to do to differentiate, and we'll bring in the 4th or the 5th. And then on top of that, we have these systems innovation. This is pure experimentation. This is experimentation around mobile. It's experimentation around account-based marketing. It's experimenting with locations. I want to experiment when someone comes in my store. Do I know who they are? Do I know what they've purchased online before? Do I know how they prefer shipment? Those kinds of things we'll experiment with. Once they become part of how I differentiate my business versus my competitors, they drop down to a system of differentiation. So this is all about looking at your capabilities and then building your technology as you go. Because ultimately, what we all want to do is tie these systems together, bring data together from those systems, break down the silos of the systems so that we can integrate data and we can understand what really works and what doesn't work, and fundamentally what affects our business. Because ultimately what we want is a dashboard, whether we look at it like a table, how's it working in terms of the campaigns I run or the content I change or the tools I use to attract, engage, or convert, or we want to look at it from a funnel standpoint. How are the things I'm doing bringing products and customers through our pipeline? But ultimately, this is where we want to get. We want to get to the place where we're integrating those systems, the data from those systems, to be able to analyze and dynamically grow. And that's where the Walmarts and the Amazons are. But we've got to get there. We've got to center on the KPIs that we can measure that have an impact to our business. We've got to understand the capabilities and the systems that supply those KPIs. And then what do we want to do next?
Oh, that looks great. I love the simplicity of this, right? And so now we got to figure out how to get there. So this is great. So I know in our conversations, just to go back to what we had talked about, again, it's, what makes marketing effective in today's disruptive digital world? How are we customer centric? How do we leverage the data to kind of tie back to our business strategy and measure effectiveness? How do you build that culture of continuous improvement, right? And so how are we going to take that last slide, take those core KPIs out of all the KPIs available to us and communicate to the organization what's important so that everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction, if you will. And then, how do we integrate the marketing goals with the company goals? And what are those cascading KPIs that tie to marketing activities, sales activities that really contribute back to the company's success? So those are key, right? So we've talked about those three things. Tom, you've really kind of given us a lot to think about, and it's very overwhelming, right? And so um, when you kind of think through this, in our next two series, what we're going to talk about next is kind of how do I get from A to B, right? How do I take this vast, um, all the technologies available to me, all the things that I have on my plate, to kind of build out that simple dashboard that you just talked about. And then what does the implementation plan look like? How do you get it funded? How do you think about this? How do you put it into your business plan? And I know as we're talking to CMOs and CEOs, this stuff can be expensive, but if you spend it in the right way and allocate your capital in the right way to build the right dashboard, you'll really understand how to kind of incrementally grow your business and, as we say, kind of shift the demand curve.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's about making sure we're getting a return. I mean, we're a department, we're an entity that touches our customers and is responsible for growing our business, and we've got to be able to show the return on that.
Yeah.
And so, in this disrupted world, as we've gone digital, as people are working from home and it's becoming the norm, having the right way to implement that program to build those capabilities and help us march down that run that marathon, if you will. That's really the key, I think, is showing results.
I feel like, every good video series has a cliffhanger, and I feel like we're at the cliffhanger right now, right? We've kind of put all the pieces together. Now we've got to get to the roadmap and kind of get our take on how you make it happen.
Let's do that next.
I'm looking forward to it, Tom. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you. Thank you.